Hello everyone. In today's cryptid profile I'm going to be doing is a giant bird from Tanzania. Not just any bird and not an ostrich. A giant bird of predatory nature. And that is say hello to Makalala, was a cryptid giant bird reported from Tanzania. Described as a long-legged raptor-like bird with horny tips on its wings. The Makalala was described as a monstrous bird taller than an ostrich, 2.1 to 2.8 meters, with very long legs, the head and beak of a bird of prey, and the ability to fly. Each of its wingtips was said to bear hard plates composed of horny compact substance, which produce a very loud sound when the wings are struck together, earning the bird's its name. The Makalala name means unknown noisy. Count Marshall, who first described it, claimed that it was said to be very fierce animal, but Gustav described it as shy. It could be killed by hunters who pretended to be dead, allowing them to ambush it. And the skull of Makalalas were used by native chief as helmets. It was described by the Wasikwa and Zigora people who inhabited the land between the Ilovo and the Wyoming in the Wami rivers in what is now Tanzania, 8 to 9 days away from the coast opposite of Zanzibar. Sometime before 1878, Gustav saw in Zanzibar a rib which seemed to have come from a type of gigantic bird. It's narrow from one end to the other, was 8 inches at its widest end, and was just 1 inch at its narrowest, however. Fisher was reluctant to believe that the rib actually came from a bird. But the question is, what type of bird that is misidentified as? There are several other birds in Africa, some living or maybe an extinct species of bird. There are a number of theories concerning the Makalala's possible identity. The shoebill is native to the western Tanzania, but may occasionally travel eastward and is very large and imposing looking. However, it does not have a horny tips on its wings, does not scavenge carcasses, and it's noted its overall appearance is one singular that it seemed unlikely that the tribe would confuse such an unmistakably species with anything else. So, if it's not a shoebill, and it's not the large one, because the shoebills' size are standing between 110 and 140 centimeters, 43 to 55 inches tall, with some reaching 152 centimeters, 60 inches, and their wingspan range from 230 to 260 centimeters, 7 feet 7 inches to 8 feet and 6 inches. So, not a shoebill. Perhaps a marabou stork is native to Tanzania, is very large, and is fierce enough to fight off vultures. But Shakur notes that it is unlikely that such a familiar bird would have been converted by local myth into the mystery animal. However, it points out that during the Pliocene era, there was a species of very large stork, and that is Loptotilos falconeri, which stood taller than a man. It it had slightly smaller wings, suggesting that it was more terrestrial than the modern marabou stork, but was able to fly. It is believed to have gone extinct 2.5 million years ago. But Shuker writes that if it survived into historical times, there is no doubt that it could have been thought provoking Makalala's candidate, although marabous do not have raptor-like beak reported on the Makalala. Eremopesis, another large prehistoric bird that lived in Africa, which lived during the Eocene until around 33 million years ago. Its fossils suggest that it was very large, flightless, and possibly predatory. Shuker notes that, although the fossil record is famously incomplete, it seems implausible that this species could have lingered on into the present day or given a rise to modern descendants without some geographically intervening remains have been found somewhere between Egypt and Tanzania's portion of the East Africa. So it's not that bird. How about a description of Makalala's somewhat recalls of the forest racket or terror birds, which believed to have gone extinct around 2.5 million years ago, although the only confirmed terror bird fossils come from Americas. A possible first racket, Lactodontavis africana, is known from Eocene Algeria, from a single femur bone. However, terror birds were definitely flightless. So Lactodontavis is the only terror bird found in Africa. The first rackets are from South America and Antarctica. So if this genus were indeed a first racket, the ancestor of Lactodontavis might have migrated into Africa from the west during the Eocene. The Atlantic Ocean separated South America from Africa by at least 1,000 kilometers or 620 miles, ruling out that the land migration for a flightless terrestrial bird like Lactantavis, the only means to entering Africa would have been through rafting on floating islands or island hopping. Currents traveled westward in the southern South Atlantic during the late Pliocene. So, there are no fossil records of any terror in Africa in the Oligocene, Miocene, Pliocene, or even the Pleistocene. So there's no evidence of them in Africa that survived throughout the time. Or it could be a flightless bird, ancient ostrich, long legs, and that is the Asian ostrich. I know what you're thinking. Asian ostriches only lived in Asia, but there are early records that range from the Pliocene epoch in Africa to the Pleistocene Holocene epoch in northeastern Asia are considered dubious. A specimen found in Morocco could be 20% bigger than the adult living ostrich, but the African specimens are considered dubious, and the exact proportion are difficult to reconstruct on basis of available material. So, not an Asian ostrich. Some zoologists have suggested that the secretary bird of East Africa, making it like a modern terrier descended. But this is a common misconception because secretary birds are not closely related to terror birds. They are more closely related to birds of prey, like Accipitriform. That includes hawks, eagles, vultures, kites. Secretary bird are also generally corresponds to Makalala's morphology. It has long legs, strong wings, and the head and hooked beak of a bird of prey, and horny claws on its wings. Although it is not nearly so large, Schuker notes that there are few birds species with claws, and along them, the secretary bird is the only carnivorous species. Carl speculates that the Makalala may have been a species of giant secretary bird, not necessarily as tall as the Wasikua's state, but much larger than normal secretary bird. Alternatively, he also suggests that the Makalala could have been a giant false secretary bird, a different raptorial species which had come to resemble the secretary bird by convergent evolution. One one such example of the false secretary bird is Apatosagittarius, is an extinct monotypes genus of Axipetridea, like the bird of prey, but it is from the late Miocene of Nebraska, so not in Africa. Despite its appearance of a secretary bird, that is convergent evolution at its finest. Carl Schucker writes that given the lack of sightings seen in the 1870s, if Makalala ever existed, it is now likely to be extinct. However, he notes that its former existence may yet be still proven, given the fact that the Wasakoas were said to use Makalala skulls as helmets. Some of these may still exist, either hidden or a not discovered location, or they're hiding. Wherever it is still there, is still out there, or extinct, or maybe a misidentified animal. Who knows? Like and subscribe, and see you later, guys.